Good morning, everyone, and welcome to GPAC 4th Peace Education webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today and for your interest. I'm happy to see that we are joined by quite some people. My name is Kristina Miletic. I'm the liaison person for Peace Education Working Group. I'm also regional coordinator of the GPAC Western Balkans, and I work at the Knowledge Practice and Advocacy team at GPAC. Before we get started, I would like to introduce GPAC for those of you who are not familiar with our work, and then I will introduce our expert Loreta Castro. GPAC was founded in 2003 as a member-led network of civil society organizations active in the field of conflict prevention and peace building across the world. Our mission is to promote a shift in how the armed conflict is dealt with, a shift from reaction to preventing of armed conflict. How do we do so? We work together with our members. We focus on the bottom-up approach and what our local members do and need. We are present and we have 15 regional networks of local organizations. Together with them, we try to prevent a conflict. In doing so, we focus on different topics such as human security, gender, dialogue, and mediation. And one of them is peace education. Since 2006, GPAC members from all corners of the world have been working together to exchange information, skills, and strategies on how best to engage and collaborate with key stakeholders in their education systems. And our members have created the Peace Education Working Group. It is a very unique working group that brings together civil society organizations, teachers, academia, and representatives of ministries of education or other relevant government agencies to build the capacity of peace educators, teachers, and civil society organizations to integrate peace education in national curricula, teacher training, and education-related policies and recommendations. As you may already know by now, we have one webinar planned every month where our members are sharing their expertise with you. I'm happy that today we have with us our expert, Loreta Castro, who is going to share lessons learned from 3 decades of peace education work. Loreta has worked with the GPAC Peace Education Working Group since 2007. She is the founding director of the Center for Peace Education, an advocacy center at Miriam College in the Philippines. She currently serves the center as program director, managing specific programs including interfaith peace building and peace integration in teacher education. She has been affiliated with local and global peace organizations, some of which are the Global Campaign for Peace Education. To date, she has helped in many capacity building activities, not only in her country, but also in many others. Before giving the floor to Loreta, I would like to mention that if you have any questions, please, you can ask them via chat during the presentation, and we will make sure that after the presentation of Loreta, we read them. And you can also raise a hand after the presentation. So now I would like to give a floor and to wish a welcome warm to Loreta Castro.
Okay. Good day, everyone. And I would just like to check if my voice is clear. Christina, can you tell me if my voice is okay?
Yes, always good.
Is it okay? Okay.
Yes.
So, okay. Thank you. Uh, thank you, Christina, for your introduction. First of all, thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar. In the GPAC announcement for this, I have been called an expert, and I cringed a little bit because it may have raised expectations. But what I'd like to do is to simply share what I have learned through the years in the hope that this will be helpful to you. I understand that some of you are not from the Philippines, so please allow me to begin with a brief description of my local context. And so the Philippines is an archipelago of over 7,000 islands and is located in Southeast Asia. The population is more than 100 million, and it is predominantly Christian, both Catholic and Protestant. We're a constitutional democracy, and we were colonized by Spain for more than 350 years, by the US for nearly 50 years, and by Japan briefly during the Second World War. From the 1970s until February 1986, we were under a dictatorship. And during this period, we saw the rise of two non-state armed groups, the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, and the Moro National Liberation Front. In February 1986, we had the non-violent People Power Revolt, which helped us return to basic democratic institutions. The new government also started peace talks with the aforementioned armed groups. And by 1996, there was a peace agreement between the government and MNLF, which granted autonomy to Muslim majority areas. However, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which split from the MNLF in 1994, vowed to continue the struggle for independence or secession. Beginning 1997, there was a ceasefire, and then continuing peace talks between the government and the MILF. And with the persistent advocacy of civil society for peace for many years, the parties finally arrived at a comprehensive peace agreement in 2014. And that photo is from that time. I should note the significant contribution of women, both Moro and non-Moro women, in this peace process, because they insisted on, first, that despite challenges, the peace process must continue, and second, they insisted that the process and the outcome agreement must include women's participation. The good news today is that the Bangsamoro Organic Law has been passed and ratified. And this piece of legislation paves the way for transition into, hopefully, a Bangsamoro territory that will be marked by peace and development. There are, however, continuing challenges to peace in the country. The Philippines is ranked 137 out of 163 ranked countries, according to the Global Peace Index of 2018. And one reason I believe is that we still have one peace process that's still in limbo. The peace process with the CPP, NPA, NDF is still is stalled, and there are random armed attacks. Of course, we still have prejudices between Christians and Muslims, between dominant groups and minority groups. And of course, economic disparities, poverty, ecological problems, government corruption, poor governance, and erosion of democratic institutions. So what lessons, insights have I learned after more than 3 decades as a peace educator and advocate? My first would be, we have to start with at least 2 important questions. What is my preferred future? Or what is my vision? And Why is this my vision for the future? I believe each of us has to ask ourselves these questions and seek our own answers. For me, I realized that I wanted to help establish a culture that respects human dignity and rejects all forms of violence, including ecological violence. I wanted to seek peace by peaceful means. That is that is the privacy of nonviolent means in resolving conflicts because of the costs of war and violence. I wanted to promote peace education and advocacy as a response, and this is why I sought the establishment of a Center for Peace Education. I also realized that to be an effective peace educator advocate, we should learn how to gather and analyze information critically, raise awareness and understanding by self and others, and engage in both personal and social action. Why? Because I saw this vision as the needed practical response to the objective conditions of violence in my country and beyond, and saw this too as an ethical imperative, guided not only by humanitarian ethics, but also the call of my own faith. And I found out later that this was the same call of other faiths or spiritual traditions. I realized over time, because of my interfaith engagement, that the so-called diverse faiths actually shared common peace values. And these are love and compassion, fairness in relationships, rejection of violence, and the golden rule, expressed positively as do to others what you want done to you. Second, I realized I should begin with myself, and it is okay to begin with small, steady steps. I re-examined my own beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors, and tried to change those that were inconsistent with what I was learning. Then I tried to infuse my own teaching with the new ideas I was reading about and learning about, such as war is not in our human nature, that there are alternatives to violent ways, that violence prevention is better than cure, which is the underlying rationale behind the GPPAC movement. And then I indicated during parentheses not to underestimate any learning opportunity, because I look back at my own experience um, of the turning point or a turning point in my life when as a young teacher I became exposed to the so-called peace values, and that's when I realized my task as an educator was not just to provide mastery of subject matter and all that, but that I had a higher calling as an educator, and that was to be a peace builder at the same time. So we never estimate any learning opportunity, because that aha moment for me came while I was attending a seminar. And then I tried to be an edu learner. It's a term from the Global Campaign for Peace Education that indicates the teacher should be an educator and a learner at the same time. And then at the bottom of the screen, I quoted two people, Mohandas Gandhi and McLuhan. And I indicated these quotations because um, to me, it's telling us the importance of the educator himself or herself. That the educator is the crucial agent of transformation, um, but she or he has to transform himself or herself first before she can be credible to others. And for this reason, my own focus has been capacity building for educators. It's one of the main thrusts, also one of the main thrusts of our Center for Peace Education. Find your kindred spirits. Um, this is how I started in my own school. I tried to find my kindred spirits within the school and uh, let it be the core of a widening circle of peace advocates. When we studied and reflected together and became a support group to each other. The photo on the right is our declaration of Miriam College as a peace zone or a zone of peace. And this was an early output of our Kindred Spirits group or our peace associates. And this serves as an inspiration and guide um, in our pursuit of our school's peace education trust. Our group of kindred spirits or associates work together as volunteers during the celebration of special days such as the International Day of Peace, trainings for teachers and students, and advocacy actions against war and for disarmament, and of course, as what is happening in our country now against extrajudicial killings. And I want to say that kindred spirits welcome this. Often people want to do something, but the opportunities are not accessible to them. Next, I suggest taking a holistic approach in education. And by this, I mean engaging the mind, the heart, and the will toward action. First, through the adoption of a whole school approach, and then through the use of a holistic uh, and peaceable teaching learning process. The theory of change here is that a whole school approach is a more effective way of creating change and should be our goal. It gives attention to infusing the desired values into the various aspects of the school, including curriculum, teaching learning process, etc. It is the working together of the whole community or all the stakeholders toward common values and vision. This is a model that we are using in Miriam College. And at the center of the model or the framework, you would see vision and mission. And our work for peace and justice is explicit. Peace is a core value of our school, as well as justice and integrity of creation. And around this vision and mission are all the other components that we try to utilize to be able to meet our vision and mission. So through curriculum, through our methods, through our student programs, through materials, through enrichment of faculty and staff, through our policies, through our structures that are, that try to be participative, and then of course through peace action or activities of social concern. And in this last um aspect of peace action, we are guided by what Mother Teresa has said, which is all works of love are works of peace. So every time we do something for the other, we are doing, peace action. Next, I have a diagram that we have called um, the teaching learning process, a peaceable teaching learning process, but it is of course not unique to, to peace education. I believe it is a process that is in keeping with any valuing any course that tries to value or communicate values, and it is also something that describes any type of good education. So we touch the mind through the cognitive phase, and then build empathy and response, personal response on the part of the learner through the affective phase. And then, of course, it always ends with an encouragement to action or a challenge to action. One other important lesson is the importance of taking a comprehensive approach to peace building. We have to use a combination of approaches and not solely rely on the formal educational system. One approach is, of course, to promote peace education so we can build a peace constituency, especially women and youth, in a deliberate and systematic way. Hence, we also recognize the importance of community-based trainings. Then we try to connect with as many actors as possible, horizontally, that means with other civil society organizations, and vertically, such as government agencies, to increase effectiveness. And then we lobby for structures and policy frameworks to catalyze the changes that we think should happen. And I will just give a couple of examples. One is the Executive Order 570, which is an executive order of then President, Philippine President Arroyo, entitled Institutionalization of Peace Education in Peace Education and Teacher Education, which we saw as the culmination of the Peace Education Network's efforts to mainstream uh, education for peace. And then in the Bangsamoro Organic Law, we have proposed to the drafters the inclusion of peace education in the curriculum. And this happened because now in the Bangsamoro Organic Law, this educational provision is there. So last November, the Vice President of the Mindanao State University System and myself participated in a GPPAC Peace Education Working Group meeting where we planned how we can contribute to the implementation of this peace education provision in the Bangsamoro Organic Law. And then I have this question here, why contribute to policy implementation? Civil society organizations like us, I think, have to do our share and not leave it to government, because government agencies are often weighed down by multiple concerns. And I think that if there's something we can contribute so that goals are met, then we should. Part of the comprehensive approach for me is also building people-to-people relationships to accompany the formal peace processes. In our day and age, it remains a huge problem. The people's propensity to consider the different other as outgroup, and therefore should be excluded. So we embarked on this is an example, we embarked on a twinning project between our students who are Christians and a school in a conflict-affected area in Mindanao attended by Muslims to break down barriers of prejudice and build understanding and solidarity. Another aspect of the comprehensive approach is collaborating with regional and international peace actors to strengthen both local efforts and the wider peace movement in the world. My sixth is nourish courage and hope in others and in ourselves. Peace work requires us to have the courage to struggle against the ways of thinking, doing, and relating with others, which need to change. Peace work is always a work in progress and is a long-term process. We need patience and perseverance. Rubem Alves, a philosopher, in his poem, What is Hope, says, and I quote, "Let us plant dates even though we who plant them will never eat them. We must live by the love of what we will never see. This is the secret discipline. It is the conviction that we are doing the right thing, and so we do it. We may not see the outcome in our lifetime, but this does not discourage us." And another quote from Martin Luther King Jr., he said, "The believer in nonviolence has deep faith in the future, for he knows that in his struggle for justice, he has cosmic companionship, some creative force that works for universal wholeness." And finally, appreciate and be inspired by an ultimate wisdom. We are one. And I place this image, satellite photograph of the Earth, because this image of our Earth reminds us of this unity among human beings and between humans and our common Earth home. This perspective is at the heart of peace. Whatever is the particular challenge that is present in our own communities, one thing is clear. We can respond to the challenge better by being organized and by working together to resolve it. Working for a culture of peace and violent conflict prevention, as well as social and ecological responsibility, is a long and arduous road. But still, we should journey to it. It is not a utopian dream, but a practical necessity in these are dark times of war and armed conflict, forced migration, extreme poverty, and environmental crisis. And this is my last slide. Finally, I invite you to check out a resource in the GPPAC Peace Education Working Group portal entitled Peace Education, A Pathway to a Culture of Peace. This resource introduces various peace education themes and is a resource that was prepared by our Center for Peace Education. Thank you for participating in this webinar.
Thank you very much, dear Loreta, for very interesting and very inspiring presentation and stories that you shared with us. Now I would like to open the floor to the questions and to the comments. I can see that we have a first question from Gail Galang. And he mentioned, in being a peace advocate, I realized that you will have to deal with issues of conflict at various levels. How can you deal with persons who do not share the same views as non-violence, especially if they are very abrasive and unreasonable? Congratulations, Dr. Castro, for this very informative webinar.
Christina, so is the plan for me to answer each question one at a time?
Uh,
Or
yes,
we do
yes,
it
if that works for you.
okay, I think yeah, that's better. So we don't, I don't lose the the question. You know. Thank you, Gail, for your question. And actually, I don't have an easy answer to that because really, very often as a peace advocate, we are met with a lot of skepticism. People either don't believe us or they think our feet are not on the ground, that we are in another planet. Okay, but my response really is just perseverance. We have to, if we believe in something, and we know that, for example, in this particular case, you mentioned nonviolence. This is a core value for us, and it is a core value for a peace educator and advocate. Then we hold fast to it. We try persuasion. By the way, persuasion is a non-violent method. It's we use words and rational argument and logic to persuade another to our point of view. And there are now studies that have been done showing the efficacy or effectiveness of nonviolence versus violence. And it, I think it's probably in the web, the work of Maria Estefan and Erica Chenoweth. You can Google this, and they have actually made a research on the effectiveness of nonviolence vis-a-vis violence. And we can use the research or evidence, logic, ethics, okay, because ethical consideration is also an important way to persuade another. And it is possible we might still not uh, appeal to the heart of this other person, but we just persevere. And eventually, it is my belief that if we persevere in our in our conviction and in trying to uh, persuade them to our point of view, that there will be a cumulative effect eventually, because sometimes change does not happen overnight. I'm also a believer in the cumulative of experiences. And once there is the cumulative, there comes a point when, there is an aha moment for people. That's my long answer, sorry.
Thank you very much for this explanation. Then we have also a question from Tatiana Popovic. In what way GPAC Peace Education Working Group supports your work? And before, we also had the picture of the meeting that we of the Peace Education Working Group of the meeting that we had in November in The Hague last year. So the question is, in what way GPAC Peace Education Working Group supports your work, and why partnerships are important?
Mhm. uh, Thank you, Tanya, for your question. Um, we don't really meet that often as a peace education working group, but every time we get together, there are insights and lessons and learnings that we get from each other. And I think that is how we support each other, not only in terms of what we learn from each other, but I think the fact that we know that we are in this kind of a group gives us the energy and the renewed spirit because we try to strengthen each other. We try to uh, help each other morally, emotionally, not only intellectually. But the exchange is very, very helpful. And if you recall, in the last meeting, you were there, Tanya. Alma Berroa was with me. She's the uh, vice president of the Mindanao State University system, and she was so awed by the the spirit of the group. And at the end, I think I'm trying to see if should be in the picture, no? Um, oh,
Yes, she
anyway,
is.
there, yeah. But she's in the front seat between the two men. There she is, Alma, and she was really so awed by the spirit of the group and also the learnings that she got from that meeting.
Thank you very much. Then we have a question from Adriana Henriquez. What kind of procedures or strategies do you implement for measuring or assessing the effectiveness of peace education programs? Thanks in advance for your answer.
Okay. Adriana, we've done small scale surveys and research, not macro uh, ones, no, that is the hope in the future, but in the micro studies that we have done, uh, we have seen how changes in beliefs and attitudes have resulted from undergoing training with us. For example, I referred to the twinning project of our college with a school attended by Muslims. And the way we did it was we have analyzed, content analyzed the essays, poems, work that they have contributed to a joint newsletter. And out of the content analysis of their contributions, uh, they have expressed, or we have seen them expressing the changes that have happened to them. And this was not something that was, like question and answer type uh, uh, methodology. So we call that a qualitative approach, content analysis. They write something after an experience. You ask them to reflect on their experience, and out of that, you make a content analysis of what they had written, and that's where we found out that they were self-reporting on the changes that they saw in themselves. So that's one way. Another way is, of course, the survey, the attitudinal survey. You can prepare, and we have done that too, prepare statements to which they will agree or disagree with. You can have a 5-point scale. Uh, um, from strongly agree or strongly disagree to strongly agree, and the middle is not, neutral. And there you can measure. It's also a way of measuring if, and you can do it pre-training and post-training. So you can compare if there was a change in their belief or attitudes. Those are two of the approaches that we have used in evaluating. Is that okay? Hello, Christina.
Yes, 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 that's perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for this explanation. Are there other questions? You mentioned the medium is the message. So this is a question from Tom Lowe. Have your teaching style, methods, techniques changed since you started teaching peace?
Yes, because as a young teacher, very long ago, I was very cognitive in my orientation. I was really more like what Paulo Freire had written in his Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where, it was really like banking education, telling them all these things that I want them to remember. And at the end, giving them an exam, asking them to give back to me what I taught them. And then, when I became aware of what peace education is all about, I realized that was really bad. But of course, we all learned through the years, and I asked forgiveness for my former students. But the good news is I changed, and now I'm more dialogical in my approach, more respectful of you know views coming from my students. And I always say when there's something controversial we're talking about, uh, like the death penalty, for example. I'm against the death penalty. For me, it's against life, and for me, you don't right a wrong by doing another wrong. So someone commits murder, so you put that other person to death. For me, that's wrong. And when we discuss the death penalty issue in class, so many of my students, um, we really, what do you call that, argue, okay? There will really be a big argument in class. But, in the end, I will just say to them, that is where, that is my point of view. I respect your points of view, but I hope that you will consider the arguments I've put forth, and I hope someday you will reflect on this more, and I hope there will be some change. So it is an expression, we give our position, but we don't impose it on them. And we just hope, as I've said, by the logic of our argument and by the rationality of what we're saying, and sometimes we have to consider the ethical aspect too, and just hope that they will reflect on it, mull over it some more, and hopefully there will be some change.
Thank you, Loretta. We have also a question from Victoria Tacho. What is the major career challenge do peace educators face in establishing themselves in this profession?
Vic, hello. um, well, the challenge really is that it is, although I think the challenge is less now than in the past. Um, in the past, it has not been recognized as a legitimate um, academic field. But I think now more and more it is, what do you call this? It is being accepted. And the legitimacy, I think, is coming from the objective conditions around us. So now, more and more, I think universities are seeing the importance of the field. Um, and when we started it in Miriam, it was, in a way we were pioneering, because it wasn't yet an established academic field. But see, when there's no path, you can make the path. That's also my thinking and my philosophy. If you believe in something and there's no trail or path yet, we can slowly create the trail or the pathway. And that is what we tried to do in Miriam College. But the good news, recently, just I think a week or two ago, our own Commission on Higher Education suddenly came up with a memorandum encouraging schools to integrate peace education in higher education here in the country, and also to have that choice whether integration into existing subjects or to offer peace education or peace studies as a separate subject, as an elective, not yet as a required subject, but as an elective. But that's a big step forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then we have a question from Lucy. Could you please elaborate on the participatory methods you use and how you manage to involve families and society, the horizontal work, in addition to the schools?
Okay, there are, okay, first is the participatory method, and then horizontal. What's the last item? Horizontal.
The how you manage to involve families and society, so explaining the horizontal work in addition to the schools.
Okay. So first about the participatory methods. Um, what we usually do in training and in our own teaching is that we usually begin with an activity that will allow the learners or the participants to give their inputs, to share their experiences, and the teacher or the educator or the facilitator suspends giving a lecture or giving inputs. And once they have given their thoughts, their reflections, their experiences, their views, that is when, if the facilitator thinks that there is something that is still lacking rather, then that's when we supply the needed information or the needed ideas. So that's one way. Another way is also to, when we have a question, we might begin with a question or even a statement that we want our learners or participants to say something about. You can make them discuss in small groups, like in dyads, in triads, or in quads. Talk among themselves first, and then you harvest what it is that has come out of their small group conversation. So it's less of the lecture, moving away from it, and using inputs only at the end when there are things that might be very important and they are not coming out from the conversations of the participants. As for engaging horizontal groups, in my presentation, I said that would be other civil society organizations. It is, you know, just by engaging with them. And when we started the Peace Education Network, it was our center that started it in 1999 here in the country, 2 years after we had the Center for Peace Education. Um, we we had to find out what is around us, who are the kindred groups working on the same issues, and just invited them to um, to an organizational meeting. And that is how the Peace Education Network was born way back in 1999. And then we started with a small group. I think we were a group of 8 or 10. And then as the years went by, we grew and grew and grew, because then as we were doing the work, we got to know other groups that were doing peace education and advocacy, community-based ones, for example. They're in Mindanao, and doing peace education work there in a non-formal way, uh, among communities. And our Peace Education Network, by the way, is not just composed of people working in schools. We also have people and groups that are working in conflict-affected areas doing community-based peace education and peace advocacy. So, and we also have, by the way, members from the Department of Education and also from the Office of the Presidential Advisor um, on the peace process. And this is a government agency, the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the peace process, or OPAP for short.
Thank you very much. We have also a question from Martin. Could you please provide some examples of how the center did the integration of peace in education into colleges of education or teacher education institutions in the country?
Okay. I have mentioned earlier that one of our thrusts as a center is to hold capacity building workshops for colleges of education. And a reason for that is really because we think colleges of education, which, or sometimes we call them teacher education institutions, are a crucial group. They have the so-called multiplier effect because the faculty teaching in colleges of education are training or educating the prospective teachers um, of the country. And so for about, well, nearly 10 years now, I'd say 10, annually we hold a workshop for so that they can be capacitated as peace educators, and we encourage them to pass on the training to their own students in those colleges of education. And by the way, if you are wondering what the content of the training is about, we don't have the time for me to describe it in detail, but if you can access that resource that I mentioned to you earlier, Peace Education, A Pathway to a Culture of Peace, and it is available for free online. You can take a look at the table of contents, and it more or less will indicate to you the topics that we cover in those capacity building workshops for colleges of education.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask if there is one final question from the participants. No? Well, I would like to thank you very much, Loreta, for this very inspiring presentation and for sharing your expertise with us today. We recorded the webinar and it will be available on the GPPAC website. You can also share it with your contacts. And also, if you would like to stay updated about our upcoming webinars, please check our website, www.gpac.net. And the next webinar will be held on 23rd of May and will be given by our colleague Diana Lepe Sanchezon on experiences on 13 years of Peace School in Mexico. Thank you again for joining us today and for your time. And thank you very much, Loreta, and I wish you all a nice day.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Sorry for missing the first part. I had technical problems. Thank you all for inspiring webinar.